Hi, this is Michael Cullen for Film Sound Tutorials, and today we're going to continue with another video in my video series for the one-man workflow for post-film sound. And this video is the first talking about the mixing process for your film. And in this video, I'm going to talk about panning conventions for stereo output. And in another video I'm going to make soon, I'm going to talk about mixing and panning in a 5:1 environment, which is a little bit different. And mixing is a very subjective process. And so these next few videos, I'm going to show what works for me, but there are many different ways to get a decent result. And so in the previous videos, I did all of the editorial work for the film. And so the first thing I'm going to do to start the mixing process is I'm going to group all my tracks together according to families so I can easily manipulate them on a family by family basis. And to do this, I'm going to first group all my dialogue tracks. And so I click on the first dialogue track, hold Shift, and click on the last group track and create a new group. And we're going to call this DX group. And in this window, you can see all of the tracks I have in my session and then the tracks that I just selected. And so by selecting them first, it automatically populated this right-hand side so I can add them into my DX group. And we're going to click OK. And we're going to do the same process for the next couple families. So we're going to do Effects Group. And we're going to do the same for the Foley. And if you hold Control G, that's just a shortcut to do it. So this is Full Group. We're going to do that for the backgrounds. Control G, BG Group. And for the music, we've already set up a music group in my previous video, and so we already have that there. Now I'm going to unselect all of them so I can edit each audio clip individually. And the reason we set those up is that if I need to edit multiple audio clips at a time, using a group is a very powerful way to do that. For example, I can show you if we're in our effects group and I want to edit all of these sounds. Now with the effects group selected, I can now move all of these clips very easily. All right, so let's talk about panning. Now, panning is a very subjective topic, like I said. However, there are some conventions that have come about after years and years of mixing audio for film and TV. And so the first convention is to keep all of your dialogue tracks panned to the very center of the left and right output. And so one of the reasons we do that is because if the dialogue is panned to the right-hand side like this,
Hey, Murphy!
The people on the left-hand side of the auditorium or movie theater that you're watching your film might not be able to understand what the character said. And so in general, we keep all of the dialogue panned straight to the center for the entire film. Now, there could be a case in some circumstances where you would want to pan the dialogue. And so, for example, in Murphy's Law, we have a scene that takes place between Murphy and the puppet,
Murphy!
where they are in split screen. And so to heighten this visual effect, you could decide to pan the dialogue corresponding to where the character actually is seen visually. So to go to the pan option, we just go over to the left and hit pan, and we could pan Murphy where he is visually on the screen. So we could pan him just a tad. I would say he's about 50% to the right-hand side. So let's grab this and pull it down 50% to the right, which you can detail by the little caret right there. And so let's see how that sounds.
Who is this? I don't understand.
And so to balance this effect, we could now pan the ADR of the puppet, which is down here, to the left-hand side of the screen. So take this, move it 50% to the left, and solo it, and see how that sounds.
Murphy! Where the hell are you?
Who is this?
Do you have a clock in your house?
I don't understand.
Do you have a clock in your house?
I'm on the microwave.
Then you should know that it is...
So that could be a good situation where you'd want to pan the dialogue. Otherwise, another time that you could pan the dialogue would be for your group tracks. And so in this previous example that I showed before, you have the wife talking to Murphy while you have a blonde actress on the left and a woman in a blue sweater on the right. And to allow the wife's dialogue to not be covered up by the blonde girl in the blue sweater, you could pan them to the left and right respectively, so you can hear the wife more clearly. So it'd sound something like this.
Yeah, Murphy!
Murphy! I saw the whole thing. I'm so proud of you, baby. It's a boy!
And so that's one way where panning can help focus the audience's attention to what's the most important sound going on at that moment. So that's pretty much the conventions for panning dialogue. Next, we'll move on to panning background, since those also don't need too much work. So here's my background tracks. The mono track is going to be panned to the center, which makes sense because since it's acting for a room tone for its scene, it should be panned in the same spot as the dialogue tracks. Otherwise, all of my stereo backgrounds should be panned completely to the left and completely to the right, which is the default for a standard stereo track. And that would be the same for my BGAs and my BGBs. Now let's move on to music. For music, there isn't as much of a convention as the other families. It's much more subjective on how you can pan your instruments. Now, a good rule of thumb is, normally you try to keep your lower pitched instruments towards the center, while your higher pitched instruments would be on the outer left and right. So for example, a good place to pan the acoustic bass would be, let's say, right down the center of the track. Also, let's say we could pan our drums, which are currently completely left and right, and bring those in just a tad, maybe to 50%. Now for our acoustic guitar solo, because it's a solo instrument, we want to bring it a little bit closer to the center so it draws a little more attention. So let's pan that to the center. But to make way for all the dialogue, we might want to pan it just a little bit higher than center, maybe on the left-hand side.
I know, it's been stressful lately. Chief won't stop yelling at me. Guys at work.
And so you can see how now the dialogue has its place in the mix down the center, where the acoustic guitar is just slightly off to the left, but still has its own place as well. Now the strings will probably be the highest instrument I have. And so those should be panned out completely 100% on either side. The electric piano, a little bit lower, so let's bring that in to, let's say about 80.
Rise to the challenge.
And so what you can see I'm doing is now giving each instrument a special place within my stereo sound field. So with the music pretty much set up, let's go back to my effects and my Foley tracks. Now for panning, the effects tracks and the Foley tracks are where you're going to be spending most of your time, since you're going to be panning them on a clip-by-clip basis to follow where the source is coming from visually on screen. So here it looks like we have a shower sound effect. I believe this is on the transition. Right, and so I have the shower sound effect to draw attention to this guy showering over here on the left. Now, to pan that, I should put that in pan mode, and then I could just pull this down and put it to the left-hand side. I would say it's about maybe 60% to the left-hand side. If this is center, this would be about 50%, so maybe 60%. And so now on this shot here, the shower even goes further to the left because now the shower is almost off screen all the way over here. And so let's pan this even higher. And to add a panning point, you hit Control, and that gives me an extra point. If I want to get rid of it, it's just Alt. And so let's see how that sounds. Great, and now we're using panning to really help show the visual layout of the set. Now using this drag method is a little painfully slow when you have hundreds and hundreds of audio clips to pan. And so an easy way to do that is if you go over here to the left, instead of being on read mode, which is the default for Pro Tools, and which just means read automation, and what we've been editing here is an automation line, let's go to touch mode instead. And you can see how it turned red. And so what touch mode does is allows us to record our motions in real time on this automation line. And so if we open our track mixer, then we can see we have our volume slider and we have our pan knob here. So instead of doing the editing, it would be much quicker if I just moved the pan knob and it would record my movements. So let's try that. Cool. So you can see how by using this touch feature, it lets me automate what I'm doing with the pan knob. And the reason I like to use touch versus the other ones is that if you let go, then it will automatically go back whatever automation you had on the line originally. And so as you can see here, if I let go, it goes back down to 0, or the center point, which is what I originally had on my automation line. And so let's see where this should go. This is a close of the locker, and we could probably put it a little bit to the left. And what's nice too, since I'm in pan view, you can visually see the red line being recorded. And so you can be going up and down like that. Awesome. To do that easily for all the clips, normally I just hit my effects group down here and turn them all to touch mode. And undo that. Now, here for the transition, I have a little whip pan sound. And to make that sound larger, I'm going to pan those to the left and right respectively. So just put one to the left and put one to the right. And you can see now how it's a little bit larger. And you can see in my pan view, there you go. Awesome. And that's the process for panning audio clips on a clip-by-clip basis. Now for Foley, it's the same exact process. So let's go down, and it looks like I have 2 sounds for the putting down of his toothbrush on the bench, as you can see right there off screen. And so he does that probably 50% to the right. Let's put this into touch mode. Let's actually put them all into touch mode. There you go. And I'll put this over about 50% to the right. And I'll do the same thing for this. Great. And so you can see how much quicker it is using touch mode and writing automation points than manually editing the automation by yourself. So of course, the last thing we're going to do is save this session, as in save file copy in, audio files. And since now we're working within the mixing portion, we're going to put this into our mix. Call it Murphy's Law Mixing Super Session, and it's the same date. And we'll click OK. So this concludes our tutorial on beginning to mix, and in the next mixing videos, we'll start creating our submasters and then working with our levels. So thank you for watching, and take care.